I'm very excited to invite you to the first edition of Mentored TV, where I'm trying to interview fantastic brains, fantastic minds, and real authentic personalities, telling you a little bit what they lived through, what they can share, and thus what they can mentor and give in terms of their own inspirational ideas by looking at what they've done, how they got into good situations, out of bad situations, and why they are where they are right now. And my first guest, number one, is Saijal Patel. And well, apart from being a dear friend of mine, she used to be a colleague of mine at CNBC, a co-anchor in Asia. Whilst I was anchoring in London, in Europe, she was sitting in Singapore. And just a quick wrap up of what she's all about. She comes from finance. She is as excited about business and finance as I am. She's actually a CFA charter holder. That is a very difficult kind of certification to get if you know the industry, the financial industry. She's been working for business news, a big part of her career. First of all, for BNN, that is Canada's business news network, and then joining us at CNBC in Asia itself. And whilst in Asia, she got a really amazing award. She was voted one of the most influential South Asian women executives in the media and entertainment industry. Saijal Patel, join us. I'm so excited to have you as number one on the show.
Oh, Patricia, so thank you so much for reaching out. I'm so excited to be here.
No, it's fantastic, and I have to say, apart from having that fantastic career in finance and then in TV, you are now a female entrepreneur, and as I was trying to explain, you are excited by finance, by business, by money, but there is a big gap between having that fascination and needing money and where financial well-being and the actual reality where a lot of people perhaps don't know how to handle money. So how did you get where you are right now, also as the founder and CEO of Saijelle?
Yeah, so, you know, I guess going back, I was very fortunate that I grew up with the money values that I had from my parents. And you know, sometimes I say that was actually by accident because my parents were immigrants from India that moved to Canada, and it was the typical immigrant story. You know, they worked really hard. They had to send money back to their families, very large families in India. So they really watched their money, and they never sheltered my brother and I from that. So they taught us values about saving for a rainy day, being responsible for money, but also sharing it for those with those that were unfortunate. So I was really proud that I had those values. And then going, forward, when I'm in university, I started studying finance. And like you said, I was a financial journalist, but before that, I was a financial advisor and an analyst. And through all of that, Patricia, what I realized was just how fortunate I was, right? Money is something that touches all of our lives in every way. We need money to have the roof over our head, for just security, and we need it to thrive if we want to do more than that. And yet I felt that the concept around personal finance, and just even going beyond that, how the economy works, how the political system works, how that affects all of us in our ability to reach financial security, was misunderstood by the masses and probably not even appreciated as much. And you and I know this, having worked in it at CNBC and just in business news, it's really meant for a niche market. And I feel like it wasn't accessible to the average person to really explain to them why this is important. And that really spoke to me. And what I realized was, you know, the 10%, perhaps it's 10%, I don't know, yeah, but 10% of the people who do understand this are on one side of financial security, and everyone else is somewhat on the other side and very vulnerable to those people who understand it and make decisions on their behalf. And I just felt like there's something not right about this. You know, we're in this together. You can't have 10% of people being financially secure and understanding this and making decisions on everybody else's behalf, and those people feeling very vulnerable. And it was the main reason why I launched Saijelle. Now, Saijelle has a couple parts to it. Saijelle specifically is a play on wise women, Saijelle. But I really wanted to speak to women in particular because they do have unique challenges.
Well, I think this is extremely important to start perhaps with the status quo, how you actually came across and how you came to realize that there was this gap between the know-how about the basics of budgeting, personal finance, the basics of how our economy works, and perhaps also the lack of interest from the masses.
I think it was because when I was at CNBC, so many people would come up to me and ask me questions, either for stock tips or other things. A lot of women would come up to me and said, I just don't understand at all what you're talking about. And why is this even interesting? And I just thought, wow, this is the most interesting thing I do because it touches everyone's lives. So that was an awareness that I had early on. I also understood that people were very intimidated by the topic, men and women. You know, they just didn't fully understand that. And I loved explaining it to them.
Yeah.
That was a big one. When I started digging in to the research and the data, which I hadn't done until I was really looking into building this business, I was shocked. You know, I didn't even realize that we had such a financial security gap. Globally, really. I mean, there are some countries that might be doing better than others, but this is really a global phenomenon.
Yeah. And let me just pick up on that. So basically you were approached privately with questions, perhaps by people you knew, that made you aware of something that turned out to be not only a local issue or national issue, but a global issue. That there is not only the financial gap, you know, the inequality, but also in money, but also the inequality of the basic knowledge of it. And what would you say to these people coming up and saying, hey, Saijelle, what does that mean? Or how do I invest? And what is a stock anyway? How did you react then?
I just understood that they wouldn't have known. Like there was a lot of shame, Patricia. A lot of people felt like, you know, maybe I really should know this stuff, but I don't know it. And that's where it really dawned on me. I said, you know what, you should know this. This financial education should be mandatory as far as I'm concerned. There should be a huge concerted effort by governments to do this. And yet it really is not accessible to the average person in a way that's relatable and understood without the jargon and everything else, right? And that really was an eye-opener to me, that people just didn't understand. The other feedback I get quite a bit now is that, okay, well, there is a lot of information out there, right? We have the internet, you can Google things, but the feedback I get is there's so much out there that it's absolutely overwhelming for most people. And the other thing is they don't know what to trust. So they don't actually do anything at all.
Yeah. So what you're saying, okay, we have migrated from a total darkness where people didn't even know where they could get any kind of information. Now there is the accessibility through the net, but now there is like so much noise and you don't know what is real information to follow, who has credibility, who you can really trust, because everybody wants to sell us anyway something. So guidance from people like you is fundamental.
Absolutely. And that's how I teach what I teach. You know, there's a methodology to what I teach because there is a lot of noise. I joke around. At CNBC, in some ways, we were paid to create noise every day. It was meant for a certain audience. That's it. But it didn't mean that you had to follow that to necessarily build a long-term diversified portfolio. You know, that's not what it was meant for. So I help people just be able to take information and the basic things that they need to know, the building blocks, and help them with their financial goals. So I have a very different lens to it. And the way I usually start it is, okay, you have financial goals. Everyone does, whether it's to buy a house, to educate your children, to take a vacation, to retire. You have that. And now you look at money as a resource. Savings, assets, whatever income you make. How do you use that in the most effective way to get your goals, to reach your goals? And people understand that.
Yeah.
When you get that, then you can start breaking down the little pieces, and they can relate very quickly.
Yeah, but what you mentioned before, I like to hook up on that one, which is, the shame. You don't really want to own up as a grown woman, as a grown man, even that you don't understand, or you wouldn't know what even a normal pension fund scheme is, or how you can save taxes, or what is a tax advantage or what not. And I wonder about the accountability, Saijelle. So if you look at the system right now, I didn't have financial education at school. Mm-hmm. I had a normal education, and yeah, you would talk about, you talk about anything, but not really the economy. What's the difference between consumption and investment and really profit? You don't teach that at school. So unless you go to university, and either it's part of whatever you study, or it's something that you want to study, you don't have that much of a touching point to that subject. However, I want to know who is accountable here. Is it me, the consumer, the individual that needs to go out? Is it the system where from the government it should be really mandatory to have a basic financial education in the normal school system? Is it the corporates that are looking at potential employees that pay taxes, that also consume their goods and need to consume their goods all through their lifespan? Or is it the parents that have to, money or not, pass on certain values about financial well-being? And I think financial well-being is a very important term that a lot of people don't even know what it means.
Yeah, I'm so glad you raised this point, Patricia, because in short, I think it's everyone. I always say it takes a village to be have a financially secure society. Yes, the onus is somewhat on us, but we don't really, what I have found is people don't really, it's like you don't know what you don't know. And people don't really understand what's at risk by not doing some of these things. And to me, I feel like that's a huge responsibility for governments to be able to do that, and be proactive to make sure their society is financially secure. We look at the situation now with COVID-19 and the impact that this has had, which is just tremendous. I couldn't have even fathomed that it could get like this. But here we are, 3 weeks in lockdown here in Canada, and people do not have enough money to pay rent for just 3 weeks, right? And I think, I know we wouldn't have had expected something like this, but it should be a wake-up call to government to say, maybe if we were proactive and really push education on emergency savings and accountability, maybe we wouldn't be in this situation. Certainly not as bad. Well, and then you fast forward it and you're like, okay, if they don't have money for rent, how would they possibly have money for 20, 30 years in retirement? Like, we're seeing this now.
Yeah, but if you roll it back a little bit and dig deeper, the problem of financial security is not new, because I just dug up a few stats, and I'm sorry to bore everybody with a couple of numbers, but I was flabbergasted myself. And this applies to the US. And let's take that as an economy, because recent stats have shown there's like 10 million unemployed in 2 weeks of COVID lockdown in the US. This is quite tremendous. And the average, I think, is that you have per employee about 6 people that depend on that income for a livelihood. So this is big, and perhaps it's only the beginning, because there's only a few days of lockdowns that's happening. So let me just intrigue you. Then this is Federal Reserve Bank of New York. In 2019, private household debt was $14 trillion, trillion. Mainly mortgages, but also credit card debt. And the average American has about $36,000 of debt. That's all the Americans. And about 14% have over $100,000 of debt. Now, you think about that, Saijelle, debt, financial well-being. Not only is there a huge gap, but to get out of debt, just to zero it out, to have a chance to even build financial well-being or security, it's like trying to go from A to Z, just jumping the entire alphabet apart from those two letters. How do you get there? What would the solution be in a situation like that? What would you say?
Yeah. And that's part of why you have to recognize the economic system and the political system and what it's doing to financial gap. So that's why, we talk about financial literacy and people just automatically think, oh, that's going to teach me debt management or how to invest. It is so much bigger than that, right? Because if we actually understood the bigger picture, I always say we would vote differently. We would hold our politicians accountable for different reasons, but I don't actually think people are necessarily aware of it, or they feel they just put their hands up and say, I give up, right? And we need to understand, okay, so politicians are there to make sure the economy is running. That's how they get voted in. There's jobs, the economy is going. Well, how do you do that? You just talked about the US. Well, consumption makes up 70% of the GDP. So you get people to spend, buy this, go out. That's the problem with that. And there's nothing wrong with spending. The problem is we've just tilted it far too much. It's excessive spending. Like you said, we have low interest rates right now, so low that that's actually created the credit bubble that we've seen. And I don't think people realize that. So we're on this hamster wheel of spending constantly, and we're not even thinking about saving. Now, does the current government care? No, because you know what? They're going to be gone in 5 years, in 10 years, and somebody else is going to be left holding the bag. And that's part of the problem. But inherently, there's a systematic problem here.
Yeah, and the systematic problem, if I might add to that, is that most of these people are raised with debt is good. You can afford everything, just pay back in little chunks. And of course, if I, as a corporation, I sell my car on a loan, I know I get the underlying money and I'm going to earn some interest eventually. And if I don't earn interest, at least I get rid of my stock. So it is, yes, you consume, but it's on a hot air bubble. So it is a house of cards. And this maxed out situation, I mean, how do we ever get rid of it? I think is the fundamental issue how this economy, and perhaps here also capitalism, stops working. Where capitalism is good, you need to invest, you need to leverage in order to invest. However, to invest, not to consume, or not to consume so much. And I think even those basics are not necessarily known by whoever takes the loan out, nor should it be known by whoever gives the loan out, at least in the short term.
Yeah. And part of it is also, I think, a government's role is creating a system understanding human behavior as well, right? We are living in a society of instant gratification. What I find actually very interesting is that we give people a lot more leeway, and it's almost counterproductive. And what I mean by that is we give people more investment choices. Take, for example, a corporation has a defined contribution pension plan. So what do? They hand out a sheet with 30 mutual funds on there because people want choice. Okay, well, then you run into analysis paralysis because when the average employee does not know how to pick funds. They have not been educated on how to pick funds and how to actually create an asset allocation. It's completely disjointed when you do that. So I said, in some ways, they're like, yeah, but they want choice. I said, the problem is it's the overconfidence, and they think that they know how to make those choices, and they don't. And maybe it's a controversial issue, but a country like Singapore, where I lived for 6 years, I have to give them the government a lot of applause because they've created a pension system that is, for some people, they think, well, it's punitive because an employee has to contribute 20%. An employer has to contribute 17%. Some people would say, well, that's a lot of money. But they actually understood that we need to make those choices for their behalf because we can't trust people enough to do the right thing.
But if I may interject, so what does that mean for a democratic society? Because that is taking charge of somebody else's free choice.
Yes.
In the name of, well, human behavior will just be not rational, but out of the guts and short term and instant gratification driven, as you were just saying.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I feel like we're lacking the leadership from the government to actually say, here's why we're doing this, and give them the stats. I have not yet seen any government, certainly not in Canada. I don't see it in the US, that they're actually speaking to this issue. You know, it's really easy to say, hey, yeah, we have, people aren't saving and we got household debt, but no one's offering real solutions here. It's tough.
Yeah,
it is tough, but we need that tough leadership.
Yes, that is. I think there is something in it, and perhaps this crisis we are going through right now, the COVID crisis. As I was thinking this morning, I said, okay, there was a BC before Christ and an AC after Christ. There's going to be a BC before Corona and AC after Corona, because I do think that things might be changing in the long term and sustainably. But let's make Saijelle, what you do for the individual, be it a woman or be it somebody that is really wanting to know more about how to handle finances. Let's try to give it the how. So somebody comes to you, take me by the hand, forget I don't have any debt, but I'm living kind of paycheck to paycheck, and what I can actually start accumulating in order to, have that financial freedom, or at least security, so I can be a woman without having a man to secure my pension, for example. Mm-hmm. What would you do step by step?
Okay, so let me just step back a little bit. And we touched on the financial security issue. When I was doing research and looking at a niche, and I specifically looked at women, that's where I was honestly absolutely astonished at the numbers that I saw. And what I realized is that women will have a very tough time reaching financial security. They have unique challenges. One is the wage gap, right? We talk a lot about the wage gap. International Women's Day comes up, we talk about the wage gap. The problem with it, and there's no problem specifically with wage gap, it is that people, or the women, do not actually understand what that means. So you make less money than a man, okay? And maybe it's because you're not in the higher paying positions, or you might not be paid equally in the same role. Whatever it is, there is a wage gap. Then women, for cultural, social reasons, they do take career breaks, whether that's to raise children or that's to take care of an elderly parent, okay? So what does that translate into? Less savings, less pension, whether it's a company pension or whether it's government pension. And women live longer. So you got less money to stretch much longer, okay? So we already have that issue. Add to that, women typically are less confident around personal finance and investing. They're very good at managing money day to day, but they're not always the best at the wealth piece of it and growing wealth. And that actually comes down to a lot of the biases over the many, many years that has been fed to women. It is also a product of financial institutions that is male dominated through a male lens, and they're not necessarily understanding that women have different views and different challenges around money. So many women feel alienated by the industry. So when I saw that, I knew that this is a audience that I really need to speak to because they are more at risk. So that was number one. The other thing is the shame and the stigma, going back to some of those biases. Like, when you think about it, so many women have come up to me and says, yeah, but I'm not good at math, or isn't money a man's world? Like, I think my husband is actually better at it than I am. And I show them the statistics around financial security, and they are shocked because men are maybe a little bit better, in being financially literate, but they're not that much better. And they're like, wow. And I said, so it's almost like the blind leading the blind. And they didn't realize. They're like, you mean I'm handing it over to him and he might not know what he's doing? And I said, no, he might not. And many men feel that pressure in saying, well, I'm the man and I really should know what I'm doing, but sometimes I don't know what I'm doing. And when I get through to women that way, they start recognizing, okay, now I understand. You can't really teach someone until they actually understand the roadblocks, right? And these are biases. These are little internal messages that we tell ourselves all the time.
Yeah.
Well, you can get them past that hurdle and actually get them to understand the risks, but also the opportunities. Almost always they're ready to learn.
Well,
then you start teaching them.
Exactly. I was just about to say, so you have to basically open them up, first of all, saying, hey, don't be insecure about money. Don't be insecure about yourself in handling money. Okay. First of all, because, hey, men, they make out to be that much better, but they might not necessarily be. So you have to, first of all, get to them on an emotional level and just open their mind. And then the next step.
Then they're ready to take workshops. So I don't do a lot of one-on-one. Right now, I'm just building my courses to move everything online, given what's happening with COVID. Yeah. But I like to do in-person workshops with a group of women because I understand that women like to learn in that group setting and they like to see that there's other women that are similar to them. And it actually is incredibly empowering because when you do that and they start bouncing ideas off each other, they're like, wow, this actually isn't bad. And I thought I was the only one who felt like this. And yet here there are 30 other women, different socioeconomic backgrounds, different cultures, different professionals. And they realize, wow, we're kind of all in the same boat. So that's the approach that I take. I run not just workshops, but sometimes it's just gathering women. And it's nothing but just let's talk about our challenges and opening them up. Yes. I think that's the first step we need to take before I start talking about asset allocation. And
yeah, exactly. Get into all the lingo because yes, that's another reason why I think so many people feel intimidated and ashamed that they don't even want to ask questions. Because whatever is flying about in terms of communication goes like way over their head, you know, and so they just go whatever. I think this is really good. Well, Saijelle, listen, I think this is a fantastic intro to what you're doing. You're really trying to shift the needle, not only for women, but for anybody, to make them realize that not only are they accountable, but this accountability is a freedom. And through the knowledge, they have a freedom of choice because they understand. And then people like you, advisors, consultants, and even in these kind of workshops, they can then add the how and really say, okay, let me see, what are you earning? Where would you like to go? How could you really tackle it? What is out there in terms of simple financial instruments anybody can perhaps get involved in, invest, and then build that financial liberty, security, well-being, whatever you want to call it.
But yeah, like you said, it is a tool. And sometimes, you know, we're told that money is dirty and it's only for the rich and we don't do good things with it. And I would say that's absolutely not true. Money is essential. Like you said, it's a tool for choice. It's a tool to take care of the people we love, our community. And the other thing is women are more philanthropic than men. Yeah. They do give back, right? So I think as women, it is in my interest and in our interest to make sure that we are financially secure, because I really do believe we will live in a better world. Money has no power except for the values that we attach to it. All it is a piece of paper. But, you know, I always say, well, attach good values to it.
Yes,
you know,
absolutely.
Do
yes.
good things with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You can do the worst, like with nuclear energy. You know, you can generate the most powerful source of energy, or you can just bomb. And I think this is the same thing with anything, really. Whatever we use it as a vehicle, we will achieve with it. And the stigma money still has, as you were saying, maybe something dirty, something you don't talk about, something if you like it, you are just being, you know, you're just being wrong. You cannot just like money because, oh my God, aren't you superficial? It's all about money. Where are your emotions? And I think we have to drill a little bit deeper, but we'll do that next time when we speak, Saijelle. For now, I want to say thank you so much. And just the last one, tell our viewers, where can they find you? Where can they find Saijelle? And, where can they find your mentoring, apart from Mentored TV?
Sure. So I have a website. It's www.saijelle.com. So that's SAIJELLE.com. And there is content up there. You can sign up for my newsletter. I have the same handle for Instagram and Facebook. And then I'll have my courses up, my online courses up in a couple of weeks. So you can check in, and that's something that anyone can take and just follow through at their own pace. Now, it is very Canadian based, but a lot of the concepts are the same. There's probably one or two things around tax shelters that might be different, but everything else would apply globally.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Saijelle, for your time, for this wisdom you shared with me and with everybody. And yeah, I'm really, really happy to have had you here. Thank you.
Oh, thanks for having me. And thanks for making time for what, we think is such an important topic.